All right. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about voter turnout, voter participation in elections in general. And I'll start out the uh, conversation, lecture, however you want, by stating basically just sort of my personal view, I guess, which is not on the test or the quiz or anything like that. But I've lived some lives and I've been around for a bunch of elections. I would consider myself probably skeptical of my fellow humans, myself included. We're all sinners. We're all fallen short of the glory of God. I believe that literally. Candidates are like voters. They're sinners. There's no such thing as a perfect candidate. There's no such thing as a sinless candidate. Nevertheless, character should matter. Character includes a lot of things, just because somebody sounds nice and high sounding, highfalutin, my grandmother would have said, or somebody sounds low and coarse, doesn't necessarily mean they're good or bad or indifferent. It's not unimportant, but you have to listen to words and also look at deeds. It's kind of a mixture of both. My general view, though, is that whoever's on a ballot, whatever the race, so pick a race. I'm not talking about a party or a particular race. Pick a race, has two sinners on the ballot or more, a whole plethora of sinners being chosen by a bunch of other sinners. So I also am hopeful enough, I guess I would never say I put faith in the system per se, because the system, of course, is made by flawed men and women, that your vote matters for the most part. It may or may not. If you're a certain party in some states, your vote may never matter, because you're far outnumbered. So whether you're a Republican in Florida or a Democrat in California, or maybe a Republican in California and a Democrat in Florida, or New York, pick your state, Texas, etc. Could be a county, could be a city. Maybe you're conservative, you live in a real liberal city. Maybe you're a liberal and you live in a real conservative city. So your vote counts in the sense that, of course, it helps you express your opinion. Even if you're on the losing side, you still need to express your opinion. I think it's a Christian duty to vote, generally speaking. I don't know if it's a sin not to vote. I'm not sure if I would go that far, but you should participate, right? If you don't participate, you don't have the right to complain, all those kinds of things to some degree. So I'm always for vote, because I want a right to say, I want a right to complain, I want a right to have a say, I look at the issues, that kind of stuff. I would also say that a democracy only functions if the people actually vote. Remember, we talked at the very beginning of the semester, demos means people, democracy means rule by people. So if we are a government of the people, by the people, for the people, as both Lincoln and John Adams said, then the people have to do something. So, when people say, well, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, if you don't vote, I guess it doesn't matter. But if you do vote, it matters, right? So somewhere in this textbook, it talks about Bush versus Gore, the George W. Bush election in 2000. It literally hung on the number of 600 or some odd ballots. 600 out of 180 million or whatever possible voters is like picking out a handful of sand off the beach. So votes can matter. If you think about local elections, your local elections often turn on literally a handful of votes. All right, so whether it's mayor of Riverside or your Ward 4 or whatever councilor district, in city council, dog catcher, whatever you're voting for. So anyway, I would encourage you to vote. Before you vote, though, I would encourage you to be up on the issues. And by up on the issues, I mean actually read about the issues. Don't follow some Twitter feed or TikTok expert who is, no offense, 21 years old and has never really done anything, but has a lot to say. Don't believe the old guys either, because the old guys and gals oftentimes may not have, So one of the challenges in today's world, as you all know, and this is going to sound weird in an online class, but I hate to say it, online is not the best way to learn things, quite frankly. Actual digging in the text and actually face-to-face conversation with people where you can actually feel and hear, tactile, oral, verbal, interpersonal, So I get why we all do online things. I do them sometimes too. Nevertheless, politics is meant to be done face-to-face, in person, now obviously given the scale of this country, obviously TV, radio, now internet, you've got to leverage some of those technologies to get your message out far and wide and make connections. So I understand that. But politics is meant to be at core face to face, just like, praying to Jesus is fine. Someday seeing Jesus face to face, perfect, right? So anyway, I think the more digital we've become, I think that helps explain a lot of why there's a lot of divisions in this country. Now, there've always been divisions in this country since the beginning of the country over slavery, civil rights, depression, World War I, World War II, national security, Vietnam, et cetera, right? So on some level, there's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said. But there's also, the digital makes it very difficult to get together and all of that. I mean, so take your discussion boards here, right? I mean, you're reading things, and you get to know some things about each other. Don't get me wrong. But if somebody says something and then you're like, well, what do they mean by that? Like, what does that word mean? And I know what the word means in the dictionary, but how do they mean it? And then you lose your tone of voice, you lose the vocal inflection, you lose the face, are they smiling? Are they straight-faced? Are they clenching their teeth? Do they have a scowl on their face? All those kinds of things have contributed to some degree to this sort of rancor or divide or any of those kinds of things. So looking at the PowerPoint slide here, I'm going to talk about the sort of decisions to vote or not to vote involving many factors. I think is kind of the general thing here. So there's slide, it's the one decided a decision not to vote. It's number 1 of 7. Why is this? Hold on a second here. I'm looking at my computer at the same time here. So slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, slide 4, slide 5. There we go. So I'm going to start at slide 5. We do still and have persistently since decades had low voter turnout as a nation. Voter turnout is just what it sounds like. People who are registered to vote. Well, there's people who are qualified to vote, right? So say anyone under 18, of course, is not legally qualified to vote. So you can take 120 kids right out of the system, right? So we see a population of 335. A little more than half of that are eligible to vote or qualified to vote, whatever, however you want to phrase it. Then you have the people that actually register to vote, right? So there's kind of some ways to look at it. You could, in some states, they make people vote. There's arguments for and against that, I'm sure. In the United States, we just literally, it's called freedom of conscience. We'll talk a little more about that. We talked about that last week, I guess, civil rights and civil liberties. You have the right to vote, but if I make you vote, I mean, it's kind of a holdover from our Christian heritage, if you think. Like, we don't make you become baptized. We don't make you become a Christian. We're not a Christian nation in that sense. We are a democracy, but if you don't want to vote, then don't vote. That's kind of the way that we tend to look at it. That's your choice to not vote, right? So if you didn't vote against Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom, or pick your candidate wherever you live. I know one of you, I think in this class, lives in Ohio or something like that. Then you, in a sense, voted for whoever won because you didn't vote against that person, right? So there even if you don't vote, there's kind of what's called like a negative implication of voting. Even not voting, in a sense, is a vote. You're voting for the status quo. Status quo means the way things are. So, and then I think for the voter turnout, a couple things. One is there's a huge cynicism. So we won't have a lot of time to talk about that in this class. But if you go back to the Vietnam War, probably starting with the Kennedy assassination in '63, but really that period through the Vietnam War into the Watergate scandal and President Nixon resigning in 1974, you have an exceedingly skeptical, cynical strain in American politics where, like, I'm just not going to vote. And then the other